The start of Asian immigration into the United States was marked with negative stigma. The use of yellowface in films perpetuated these beliefs, preventing Asian voices from being heard. The end of World War II served as a pivotal turning point for Asian representation in American media, catalyzing a shift from racial stereotypes to more complex portrayals. From the demeaning narrative of exotic Orientals to contributing members of society, Asian portrayals in media were transformed through the anti-communist mentality, improved American diplomatic relations, and propaganda. The mid-19th century marked the start of Asian immigration into the United States, which stemmed from the U.S.'s imperialization of Asian countries, the California Gold Rush, as well as the demand for cheap labor to construct the Transcontinental Railroad. However, Asians were always seen as inferior to the white race, and Chinese people specifically were viewed as outsiders who hurt the economy by taking American jobs. The growing hostility and anti-Asian sentiments ultimately led to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which suspended Chinese immigration, further exaggerating the view that Asians should not be accepted into American society. At this time, the use of yellowface was highly popular. Yellowface is a practice where white actors wear makeup to exaggerate Asian stereotypes and caricatures.
And this is at a time when they did not want to hire Asian actors.
During the silent film era, Sesue Hayakawa and Anna May Wong became the first Asians to appear in American films. Their popularity, however, stemmed from the perpetuated belief that all Asians are villains. This fed into the idea of yellow peril, the generalized prejudice that Asians invaded and ruined American culture. Fu Manchu, an Oriental supervillain and mastermind, was created in 1913. This character and its use of yellowface perpetuated the American belief of antagonistic Chinamen, hurting the image of all Asians and preventing them from being cast in lead roles.
My family is Japanese American. For our family, it was really unfortunate the way in which this anti-Chinese sentiment then bled into anti-Japanese and other Asians.
Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor further hurt the American public's view of Asians in society.
The biggest issue, of course, was the forced removal and the mass incarceration that took place. Over 125,284 persons of Japanese ancestry were removed from their homes and businesses and schools. 2/3 of them were children under the age of 18. Many were actually U.S. citizens.
Despite efforts to distinguish good Orientals from the bad ones, most people didn't understand this and assumed all Asians were the same, leading to the wrongful internment of non-Japanese Asians. Anti-Japanese sentiments and yellow peril were spread through propaganda. Films like Know Your Enemy Japan, published by the U.S. government, emphasized and clearly stated that the Japanese were highly loyal to their country and couldn't be trusted.
And into his tough little mind has been drilled and hammered the fanatical belief that Japanese are descendants of gods and destined to rule the earth and all who live on it.
Children were also fed propaganda through books and cartoons such as Dr. Seuss and Bugs Bunny. The end of World War II, however, was a turning point in the way Asians were portrayed. The U.S. took a different approach with Japan compared to the punishment Germany faced after the First World War. Instead of penalizing Japan, the U.S. focused on supporting Japan's reconstruction through occupation and creating a strong alliance.
The U.S. then, they occupy Japan because they see Japan as the main ally in which they can show other Asian countries that if you join the U.S., if you adopt capitalism, if you adopt democracy, that you will be successful. And so the U.S. really used Japan as part of their anti-communist agenda.
During this time, several pictures of Japanese people were shared with Americans to help humanize and connect with them, countering the villainous Asian view from the war. The U.S. built its relationship with Japan through the Treaty of San Francisco signed on September 8, 1951. This peace treaty established between Japan and the Allied powers allowed the U.S. to start building stronger connections with Japan, opening the public's opinion of Asians in American culture.
With Japan returned to its place in the family of nations, and with the people of Korea secure, free, and united.
After World War II, because the U.S. became the leader of the free world, and they had to follow through with the global image that they're presenting, they had to basically shift the image of how they were portraying Asian Americans.
They did this through the use of propaganda.
This is The Big Picture.
The Big Picture was a weekly TV series produced by the U.S. government that aired in the 1950s and 60s. By showing Japan's willingness to assimilate into Western cultures, Japan was shown as a friend who supported Americans because of their shared values. They also showed the rich cultural traditions of Japan, portraying them as an exciting heritage to learn from.
But the soldier didn't have to understand it all to appreciate it. And in his appreciation of the things Japan had to offer, he earned the goodwill of the Japanese people, as well as finding pleasure himself in the enjoyment of new experiences.
One of the stories that emerges from the Japanese-American wartime incarceration is the service of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team.
This segregated unit of Japanese-American soldiers fought in Europe and became the most decorated unit in American military history. The story of this regiment, published through propaganda, transformed the way Americans saw Japanese Americans, allowing them to integrate into American society. As views toward Asians in America changed, Hollywood slowly began to shift away from the historically demeaning and stereotypical roles Asians were marked with. Although negative portrayals persisted, there was a dramatic decrease in the use of yellow peril and yellow face in movies in the 1940s. This transformation in media was propelled by progressive films such as Sayonara, who showed the interracial relationship between a Japanese woman and an American man.
Other films portrayed the U.S. as this sort of savior to Asian countries.
Improved views of Asians allowed Americans to help Asian countries, also ensuring that these countries would learn the capitalist ways of the U.S. instead of falling into communism. In the 1960s and 70s, the Asian American movement coincided with the civil rights movement. These movements fought for racial justice and civil rights, bringing solidarity across different races. The term Asian American was coined by Yuji Ichioka and Emma G. in 1968, uniting people of different Asian ancestries. This empowered and fostered a collective identity, pushing for equal opportunities. They also fought against stereotypes in media through activism and creating alternative media to shape public perceptions. Despite improvements in Asian depictions, there is still misrepresentation. One of the most notable instances is Mickey Rooney's Mr. Yunioshi from Breakfast at Tiffany's.
But that was 2 weeks ago! You cannot go on and keep bringing my film!
Protests, however, led Rooney to express his regret for the role. In the 1970s, the rise of Asian personalities such as Bruce Lee popularized Asian culture in movies. However, his movies perpetuated the stereotype that all Asians know martial arts. The popularity of Asians in film was minimal at this time, which produced a one-sided story exaggerating even more Asian stereotypes. More recent media uses whitewashing, where Asian characters are made white so white actors can be cast.
It really does a disservice for audience, especially Asian American audience like me. I want to see Asian American stories get told, and I want to see people like me on the screen.
The difference between whitewashing and yellowface is their use of makeup, but they both have the same adverse effects, where roles and opportunities are taken away from Asian actors, hurting representation.
So these portrayals in the past of Asians, they all really shape how people perceive Asians. They may not be aware that they have these images, but it shapes them nonetheless, and that comes out in how people responded with racism during COVID-19.
Asian hate began to rise in 2020, driven by the COVID-19 pandemic.
As soon as the term China virus or Kung flu entered in public usage, we saw in 1 month's time, from March to April of 2020, a 300% spike in anti-Asian hate crimes throughout the country.
This hurt the way Asians were portrayed in the news, which ultimately resulted in the founding of the Stop AAPI Hate Coalition. With the use of social media, the movement was able to gain recognition and spread their message across the nation, increasing the number of Asian American voices heard. Today, Asians are starting to gain more recognition in Western movies and media. This post-war culture accepted Asians and allowed them to get better roles. Shows like Fresh Off the Boat, movies like The Joy Luck Club, and even animated films like Turning Red were cast and directed by Asian Americans, who reflected their own experiences in these films, allowing them to leave better impressions and portrayals of Asian culture. With the rise of Asian representation, people like Jackie Chan, Awkwafina, Randall Park, and Michelle Yeoh have become household names and a vital part of American culture in movies. Despite Asian cultures being seen on screen, there are still a lot more stories that need to be told.
Crazy Rich Asians reinforces this idea that Asian Americans are wealthier than other minoritized communities. If you disaggregate the data, a lot of Asian ethnic communities are actually living below the poverty line at rates that are equal to or worse than both the Latinx and African American communities in many regions of this country.
If more stories are told, people will have more diverse views of Asians, allowing them to be accepted into American society. In 2021, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings became the first superhero movie to feature an Asian majority cast. However, his origin perpetuates evil Asian origins.
So if you look at like Shang-Chi, right, his father was the Mandarin, and actually in the Marvel comics, Shang-Chi's grandfather is Fu Manchu.
This shows how the rhetoric around Asians needs to be changed and how more stories need to be told. In 2023, Everything Everywhere All at Once received 11 nominations and won 7 Oscars, becoming the most awarded film of all time. Michelle Yeoh received the Best Actress award, becoming the first Asian and second non-white actress to win this award. This changed the course of Asian representation in media in that now Asians can be seen as A-list actors, opening vast opportunities and doors for better representation. The history of Asian representation in media has changed dramatically throughout the ages, with current portrayals allowing for a celebration of Asian heritage on screen. World War II served as a focal turning point in this advancement, changing the public's perception from Yellowface's caricature to today's characters.